Joining us tonight, Fox national security and foreign policy analyst, Dr. Walid Phares. Walid, great to have you with us. This is one of the most peculiar, perplexing, and seemingly disproportionate news events that I can recall in some time. A person who's worked for the Washington Post a very short time, relatively, it's not entirely clear whether he was a paid contributor or whether he had some other kind of relationship, disappears going into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And we have accounts from Turkish sources telling us that he had been murdered by a special team of Saudis dispatched from Saudi Arabia for that purpose. What do you tonight make of the story that that some are trying out, at least, again, with unnamed sources, that he was killed during an operation, most likely an abduction, if any of this is true, purely by accident, and that the government knew nothing about it?
Wow, so many things, Lou, and all have to be confirmed. What I can project, as you would, is that at the end of the day, we will know. That's what the president has asked, both from the Saudis, the Turks, his own government. Eventually, we will know. It won't be that difficult, as long as the Saudis and the Turks together are giving us all the right information. Yes, you've mentioned that media now is projecting that the Saudis are going to admit to a wrongdoing or to an accident that took place while they were interrogating him. What we want to know really is, why him, if that's the truth? What was he doing against the Saudi leadership to prompt that reaction, if that is the case? The reaction of interrogating him, not of killing him, because if they wanted to kill him, they would not choose the consulate in Turkey. That would be a scandal in the making. So there's so much information we don't know about. But the big picture, Lou, is that our relationship with the Saudis and their allies, who are all our allies, everything now is at play, and I am very concerned that the Iranians and the Brotherhood, Muslim Brotherhood, and other radical actors in the region will take advantage of this to sink many of our projects, many of the president's projects.
The relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and Jamal Khashoggi, that part is somewhat unclear, because Khashoggi also had a very tight relationship with the Saudi royal family, whether they be the Sauds, whether they be the Aziz, whether they be bin Salman.
No, absolutely. I mean, he was part of the entourage, of the circles, of the heart of the circles, he and his family, the Khashoggi, for many years. He's somebody, he's a VIP in the Saudi political establishment. But Saudi changed and went into a direction under the leadership of Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as you know, and then he has opposed it. How do I know? How do anybody know? Well, you go to his Twitter account, which I was reading for the last 3-4 days, and yes, he sympathizes with the Brotherhood. He's not maybe a member of the Brotherhood, but he criticized the United States, he criticized the President and Congress for not opening a dialogue with the Brotherhood. That may have prompted the action on behalf of the Saudis, if anything.
Yeah, the Muslim Brotherhood, which is little understood in this country, I think it's fair to say, and when I say in this country, I'm talking about on Capitol Hill. There are people who were doing President Obama's bidding, trying to intervene with the government of al-Sisi in Egypt, even as he was forming that government, urging that 10% of, so said the Obamas to their dispatched envoys, he wanted 10% of that government to be Muslim Brotherhood. This from a man who had done nothing but to create terrific turmoil for the Egyptians. What do you make of the relationship then between Riyadh and the Trump administration? This president is being very outspoken, talking about severe punishment. It's rising to a level that I think most would have not expected.
Look, severe punishment means if it appears that the Saudi government or parts of the Saudi government on purpose wanted to assassinate Mr. Khashoggi the way it appears that the Brotherhood are displaying it. That is a big difference. But of course, the Brotherhood here in town, you have the camp of many members of Congress, not many, a few, and then many in the opposition. and of course the leftover of the Obama administration, who consider the Brotherhood still as potential allies and partners. That's why there was a divide in Washington, as you recall very well, with regard to Egypt. 30 million Egyptians marched on the streets to reject the Brotherhood regime, and yet the Obama administration consider, that revolution as a coup. So we are divided on this issue.
Divided on the issue. This administration is not. And unless somehow they're getting guidance from the State Department or some other agency within this administration, it's a very serious undertaking, and it is a peculiar place to land for a U.S. government, and a difficult and more complex, network of events than we can imagine. And by the way, we didn't even mention, what if this were collusion between the Brotherhood and Erdogan and Turkey? Then it gets more complicated yet, doesn't it? And that's just the way it is in the Middle East. You taught me that, Walid Phares. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.